Good evening and welcome to the agenda. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Tonight we're addressing an issue that stands at the core, the very core of our democracy, and that's the power of the vote. We're privileged and honored to have Ms. Jennifer Tompkins, CEO of the Wilmington Metropolitan Urban League, and she's brought a friend, a very good friend, Ms. Jerika Richardson, Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the National Urban League. Thank you so much for joining us. And Mr. Coby Owens, Advocacy Manager of the Wilmington Metropolitan Urban League. Thank you so much for joining us. These three individuals, these are leaders here to shed light on the Reclaim Your Vote initiative, a campaign that's not only about encouraging more people to the polls, it is also about the fight against the insidious barriers that often deny citizens their voice. Let's not mince words here, people. Voter suppression is real. It's happening, and it affects Black and brown people in our community and all throughout the country. It's profoundly disturbing. The Reclaim Your Vote initiative, that's what we're here to talk about tonight, tackles these barriers. With unwavering belief in the democratic process, it isn't complete until every eligible voter can fully participate. This program goes beyond just information. It's about education, it's about action, and it's about providing the resources needed to make the power of the vote accessible to all. Tonight's conversation will explore what the Urban League and the program are doing not only to mobilize communities, but to protect and reclaim the right that gives shape to everything else we hold dear. In a time when every vote truly counts, they're here to remind us that the civic engagement isn't a privilege, it's a duty, it's a right guaranteed to every citizen. Welcome, Ms. Tompkins, and welcome, Ms. Richardson, to the agenda. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
We're excited to have you back. The last time I think you were here was during the election.
Yeah, primary
election coverage, dealing with the vote. Yeah. And unfortunately, I put a post out about it. Only 22% of Delawareans actually came out to vote. We, in my opinion, I've put my viewers to the test. We are not taking it seriously. Some people say, oh, well, it's going to pick up in the primary. I actually talked to one campaign manager that said, oh, 22%, that's not bad. That's not bad. They made it very clear, and it was a Democratic campaign manager. I think they're anticipating my feeling, Kerwin's world. I think that they are feeling as though the less that vote, the better they can control the outcome, right? And they feel as though the Delaware voters, I can't speak to other voters from other states, but I think the feeling, the consensus is that Delaware voters are almost puppets on a string. We know how they're going to vote. We know what they stand for. We know the magic words, whatever. So if we're putting the right candidates in place, we don't have to worry about them coming out. I know that's not how you feel. I know that's not the way the Metropolitan Urban League of Wilmington feels. Please tell us a little bit about this initiative and why you're here tonight.
Yeah, well, one, thank you so much for having me on the show, and certainly my friends that are here as well. 22%, that's why I'm here. 22%, I will tell you, I am a self-proclaimed overachiever. It was of my whole life, and if I came home with a 22% on my report card, it would not have been.
Problems and repercussions.
Yes,
right?
very much so, very much so. And so that's the same seriousness I take this voting.
Right.
And so this is something that is a God-given right as a citizen of this country. And so every single person should be exercising their right to vote. Yeah. And, you know, oftentimes I talk about voting almost ritualistic in the sense of we do this if we don't do it for any other reason. If we don't do it because we know every candidate on the ballot, we do it because those who lived and died to ensure that we had the right to vote. So you do it just for that. And so that's why I am here, the 22%, and hoping that that other 88% will get out on November the 5th and vote. And so, but to talk a little bit about the Urban League, which is one of my favorite topics, I lead out the Urban League here in Wilmington, Delaware, and I am privileged myself and working with a great team of folks at the Urban League to ensure that folks get out to vote. We have education programs, we have workforce programs, we have health and wellness programs. But here in this season, we are ensuring that folks get out in votes. And so the Urban League, we are an affiliate of the National Urban League. We are 92 affiliates strong across this entire nation. And Carwin, I don't know if you know this, but the Urban League, I love talking about this because I'm a historian. So the Urban League was actually founded in 1910, and it was founded in New York City. And you know why it was founded? Because it was a response to the Great Migration. So the millions of African Americans who were moving from the South to the North, or from rural communities to urban communities, because we do have urban leagues that are in the South as well. And so the Urban League started off as a social service organization, and it wasn't until the 1960s where one of our presidents, Whitney M. Young, who was great friends with Coretta King and Dr. King, and they urged him to say, listen, the Urban League cannot just sit down on the sidelines and just do social services. We must also have advocacy. Right. And so ensuring that rights of Black and brown folks are here. And also, you know, one of the things that we talk about in our mission statement here at the Wilmington Urban League, to ensure that everyone has economic self-reliance. And so when we talk about voting, it also comes into that play as well. And
we're going to have Greg, sorry to cut you off there, we're going to have Greg Coverdale on the show here next week. Oh. And he's talking about that.
Yeah.
He's talking about that, and if you don't know who that is, he is a professor or at Delaware State University, excuse me, and he is talking about the importance of financial independence right here, and what and the privileges that it can give not only to you but to future generations. Sorry to get off on a thing, but no. I think it's more important.
But I often think that folks don't think that those things are connected, right? The way in which we go to the ballot box, right, in which we exercise our vote, is really setting up the future of what we have access to.
Right. I love it.
And let's just be clear, right? I'm going to be very, very clear. We are, as the Urban League, we are a nonpartisan organization, right? But we also understand, to achieve economic self-reliance for Black and brown folks, there are certain agenda items that are just higher on the list, right? And certain candidates have. And so we are here again to talk about our Reclaim Your Vote campaign. And, you know, this is a national campaign. And so I am so happy that I have a friend here from the National Urban League, Jerika, Richardson, who is leading the charge with Reclaim Your Vote across the entire nation. And so I would love for her to really talk a little bit more just about this initiative that's coming through from a national scale.
Ms. Richardson, the thing that gets me is that people are under the impression, and 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought this. 5 years, no, maybe it would have been 5 years I would have thought this. They are under the impression that things cannot change back to the way they used to be. We've seen how the Supreme Court is stacked, so to speak, towards one party or another, and how things can change. We look at this in regards to reproductive rights for women, and how that nobody would have thought that would have ever been overturned. Those things are happening, and to me, you can see the interference that goes on in certain states, some of them southern here in the United States, but things are changing. Things are changing. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's critically important that we keep our foot on the gas.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you. It's so great to be here in Wilmington with you all. As mentioned, I'm Jerika Richardson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the National Urban League. And I will say I lead a new division that was established in 2020 post the tragic deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others. So as my colleague Jennifer mentioned, the League is one of the oldest legacy civil rights organizations in the country. We've always been doing civil rights and engaged in voting rights and justice. But to your point, we recognize that there may be folks that feel comfortable, that think the gains that we had in the 1960s and 70s, things are okay, and that might speak to that 22%. But we can't get comfortable, because every step that we've made forward, unfortunately, there are people in this country who are committed to pushing progress back.
Right.
And so that's why this division was established, to support the 92 affiliates across the country who are on the ground doing the work day in and day out. And we're unique and special, and not only do they provide direct services unlike other organizations, but they are engaged in this battle and this advocacy work day in and day out. And so you can go into an urban league and get resources and help getting purchasing a home or after school programs for your children. But at the same time, we're also going to ask you, are you registered to vote? We really want to make sure that we are hitting every single person in our community. Voter registration, voter education, and voter mobilization are critically important. And so all the things that I know our families, our communities care about, we understand and recognize that no one is going to be able to live that American dream if we don't ensure access to the ballot box continues. And we've seen that across the country, there have been attacks on access, or we're dealing with folks, as I said before, that are comfortable. We really have to create this culture of civic engagement.
Yeah. Are you seeing, I mean, of course we're seeing more of it, but what's the feedback that you're getting as you're dealing with voters and you're going to these rallies and you're doing so much out in the community? What's the feedback that you're getting from the people? I mean, are they just laissez-faire about it? Like, what is it? I want to know.
Well, I think from what we've seen, you talked about the Supreme Court, there's been a lot of policy changes across the country. From the voters that we've been talking to, I realize and I feel that they understand that there is so much at stake. We've been knocking on doors across the country. I've been in Michigan, I've been in Georgia, I've been in North Carolina, I've been in Pennsylvania, and I'm here in Delaware now. We've showed up and a lot of folks are like, oh, I've already voted. I've voted early. So there is enthusiasm, and people are not only just telling us, they're telling us why. They're telling us their personal stories, things having to do with their family, challenges with reproductive rights, being, going through IVF themselves and being concerned about not being able to have a family because of some of the things that we're seeing sweep across the country. People are concerned about, quite frankly, attacks on marginalized communities. We see that coming up over and over and over again. And as an organization that focuses on opportunity and diversity, equity, and inclusion, you can look at the shirts right here. That is our mission and that is our focus this year. We want to defend democracy because it is absolutely under attack. We want to demand diversity, equity, and inclusion because although there may have been cases geared towards academia, the business community is moving forward and saying, oh, we don't need diversity, even though we know diversity is critically important for business. And then finally, we have to defeat poverty because people in this country, there can be times where there's the haves and the have-nots, and we want to make sure that everyone is taken care of.
I think it's important that people understand that these are targeted attacks. These just aren't attacks. There's a reason why they're going for these marginalized communities. And it's our numbers and it's the power of our vote and what those votes can do and how they can swing elections in one way or another. So attacks, yes, but they're targeted. They are targeted for certain communities.
It's not random.
Yeah, it's not random at all. And we have another person here, Mr. Coby Owens, who has, his finger on the pulse of Wilmington. He even knew when the construction was going down on the street and Market Street. This guy knows, and we're excited to have him here on the show. And he has done a lot for several reasons throughout the community and knowing what's going on. But Coby, you know exactly what's going on with voting here in the state of Delaware.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do here, and the Urban League's leading that fight right now. When we talk about creating assets, right, we have to look at us as a state compared to other states. Georgia actually has more assets to the ballot box than Delaware does, right? So if we here not around the table talking about why this is an issue and how can we make it more equitable for our people here in Delaware to go vote, then I don't know what the Urban League's doing. If that's not what we're supposed to, that's our charge. That's what we're supposed to be doing on the ground, and that's what we're doing right here in Delaware. We have fought to get early voting in Delaware, and this is the second cycle that we've had it. And you've seen historic numbers so far in Delaware.
It's working.
Over 130,000 people have early voted already. And we only have a small 10-day window of early voting here, but that is huge. Why? Because voting here is a community thing. It's encouraging others to go out and vote, and now our faith leaders are getting involved, doing souls to the polls here, encouraging their congregations to go out and vote. But our work isn't done just there. One of the initiatives that we're also pushing is making sure individuals who are sitting in jail in pre-trial, have not been convicted of a crime, have the access to still have their voices heard here in Delaware. And while you can do a a mail-in ballot through absentee, they don't have the access to either apply for those absentee ballots at the level that they need to. So again, we want to make sure that the voting machines are right there in the prison to allow individuals who are on pretrial to be able to vote. But when it comes to this election right here, this is one of the most important elections in Delaware's history. We have an open governor, open lieutenant governor, open mayor, open county exec, open county council president, open senator, open Congress, our sole Congress seat. So again, our voices need to be heard in this election to let them know, hey, don't forget about us.
Right.
And I think that's what this is all about. This is why we're boots on the ground. This is why we're out there talking to people, getting people registered to vote, whether it's new voters who are just turning 18, excited to get their driver licenses, or if it's people who haven't voted since the Obama years,
right,
getting them re-registered to vote, or individuals who may have been convicted of a felony but now is off of probation, making sure they know that it's their right here in Delaware that they can re-register and become an active member of this society. So that's what we're doing here at the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League. And you know, we have a amazing group of young volunteers. I just want to give a quick shout out to all the BSUs, the Black Student Unions, who have said that this year they wanted to get involved, and they got involved with the Urban League to make sure that we are getting out there into all communities up and down this state.
So I want to put this question is for everyone here at the table. Why, and I've asked this in regards to education from gubernatorial candidates, I've asked it, like, why are we so behind in Delaware? I mean, you look at it with education, we are 5th in the country, not from the top, from the bottom in regards to education. We're 25th in regards to healthcare. We only have 1 million people in 3 counties. This can't be that hard to be able to figure out. And when it gets down to rights to vote, right, that's intentional. You know, it's intentional. And I hear so many of the candidates, and we've had them all come through the show, talk about what they're going to do and how, you know, on both sides. No, I'm not against this, I'm not against that, and all the soundtracks what it takes to become elected. But when it comes down to voter rights, we're still falling behind. So my conversation to them is, well, what are you doing? Some of you are being reelected, and this problem still exists. So this happened on your watch. So what is it that you think is causing this issue?
So I'll say this, right? In Delaware, there's a proximity to power issue. If people know exactly, like you said at the beginning of this show, if they know exactly where they're going to get their votes from, that's less work that they have to do. They can focus on something else. They can focus on fundraiser or whatsoever. We do not accept that, right? We believe that everyone should have their voices heard. And it's multiple tiers to that here in Delaware, whether you're talking about at the state level, or if you're talking at the municipality level. Outside of Wilmington, most of our municipalities here have their own voter registration, which means if you don't know that when you move into one of these small towns, that you have to go to their local clerk or their local town manager and register with them, not just register with the state, then you're not going to know and you're not going to be able to vote. I call it a dual registration, right? Which shouldn't be allowed. But again, that's what we're dealing with here in Delaware. And that's why it's so important to make sure we're getting our message out, that you do have the power, right? And you can kind of disrupt the norms by speaking out, by voting, by getting engaged and volunteering and getting other people informed. There's a ton of different resources. You can come to us, you can look at the League of Women Voters. There's resource guides about where people actually stand, but also stay engaged with us. Get involved with our Building People Power campaign, and we will help train you to make sure you're staying involved and staying up to date about what is going on in your community so that you have the resources and the tools to be an advocate for yourself in your neighborhood.
And let me just add on to that too. I mean, I think it's this piece of also holding every elected official accountable.
I love that piece.
And so in making sure that we do it in a way in which folks listen, right? And so one of the great things that the National Urban League does, which I absolutely love, and I am replicating it here, is giving our elected officials a scorecard, right? How did they deliver each year on what they ran their campaign on, right? And so because I think a large part of what we have got got out of in America, right, is understanding that the people truly do have the power, right? But it is up to us to be able to empower one another, and through the Urban League, in which we are an empowerment organization, to empower, right, the people to have the power and to hold those elected officials accountable for every single thing that they ran on that ballot for.
Right. And Delaware is funny, and there's a good chance your elected official. You'll see them at the Wawa, you'll see them at the charcoal pit, you'll see them around, you'll see them at your kid's ball game, you know what I mean, or what have you. And we have, and for our viewers that are watching outside of Delaware, it's very different here. It's very different here. So it upsets me that people can be so relaxed when they're out in public, but we still have these issues. We still have people that don't understand their rights, that are behind bars. We still need to have these big voting, reclaim your vote conversations and all these other things here in this state. There has to come a time, I think, in Delawareans where we're no longer accepting this. And I love the drive of the Urban League to kindly ensure that this is happening, but let the populace know that, hey, one, we have your back, and two, we're not going to let this stand. We're going to make a change in regards to it. And I don't think...
And you got to meet us halfway, right?
You have to
that's
meet us
to reclaim
halfway.
your vote.
You
we
have to
can't
meet us
reclaim your vote
halfway.
for you, right? And we're saying like, hey, you have to reclaim your vote. And so I think the first part of this, right, is making sure that you get out on November 5th if you haven't voted already, right? And so that's the first part of that.
There's very few excuses that I know that I accept now because of all the ways that you can vote. And granted, Georgia's doing better than us, but we still have several ways that you can vote.
Right.
And the fact that you're not, and the old adage, well, you can't complain. Well, people still complain, but you have done nothing in the process in regards to it. So you're absolutely right. There is some responsibility. Jennifer, you shocked me. I mean, you absolutely shocked me when you told me about Middletown, Delaware. And the fact that it did not do well in regards to voter turnout in the primary in September. And it shocked me because I'm a resident of Middletown, right? So I'm thinking, hey, we're doing good, we're showing off, we, blah, blah, blah. And, we're dropping the ball. And so I did a little query of friends and folks that live in Middletown, and they're like, it's just a primary. It's just a primary. We already knew that this was going to happen, or that was going to happen, or whatever. I'm like, that's the excuse?
Yeah.
That's the excuse? Oh, it's just a primary. 22% of eligible voters decided, that it was important.
But I will also say this also brings to bear, and we talk about this a lot of times in our office, right? The culture of voting, right? And so, okay, it could be a small election. Okay, maybe it's not many results, right? But having a culture of voting, I vote because that's what we're supposed to do, right? And so I think that is lost, certainly, in a lot of our communities here in Delaware, but certainly even across the nation, right? Absolutely. This culture of, this is what I'm supposed to do, right? Almost as, it should be almost as natural as, or unnatural, whatever, depending on who you are, as paying taxes, right? Is that, nope, I go out and I vote if I'm eligible, right? And so that's the other piece of this. And I think that's where the Urban League certainly comes in as that trusted voice to say, voting, it should be very much a part of your life, right?
And why?
Yeah.
And why it needs to be. And I expressed this in a previous episode, is that people, you don't have to look far to find people who didn't always have that right. They are still here in your community, in your diner, in your family room, at your next, Thanksgiving's in a few weeks. Ask some of the gray-haired folk that are at your table about what it was like back in the 60s and 50s, especially if they lived in the southern parts of the United States. This was not something that they could do. There are people in your family that drank from separate water fountains, that couldn't sit together in a movie theater, had to use the balcony, and you don't have to go far. That was right here in Delaware. That was right here in Delaware. We had African-American police officers in Delaware that had to change at the Walnut Street Y because they weren't allowed to change in the police station. You may not know that, but that is true. And those folks are still alive. Okay?
And
so
things can quickly
go right back to the way.
And that's why the public education piece is so important. And I'm glad you brought up that example because we talked about folks getting comfortable, but it's also important that we connect the dots for people.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And this culture of civic and engagement is critically important, because we also got to think about the census. When people start talking about resources coming to their community, this is the thing that the muscle that we have to exercise routinely. And things can show up very differently. We can't just dismiss something because it's a primary.
Right.
It really does have to be routine. And when we talk about things going back, when you don't engage, changes happen. Legislation gets passed. People that you may not have paid too much attention to get in office, and you may find yourself in a very different scenario that you assumed was routine, but found out it was not. We saw the gains. And part of the reason we also, sometimes there is more education that we need to do. And that's why the National Urban League is putting civics education into our Project Ready programming, so that we do with young people, high schoolers and middle schoolers. It's important we're doing that because we saw since the 1970s, there's been a steady decline in civics education across the country. And why is that? That's intentional. Because we saw the rise in Black political power. We saw the rise in political power from other marginalized communities when people started to exercise their right to vote and be represented, and there was a lot more progress that was happening. Dollars going towards education civics education started to decline. So if there's something that people are taking away from you, you need to ask yourself, why is that? And so we're taking it upon ourselves to not worry about what other folks are gonna do. We are investing in our communities and are focused on educating our folks, our people, our young people, and reminding them why they need to know this information, why they need to have this culture of civic engagement, because these gains will go backwards.
Yeah, they will, and I'm excited, and I'll tell you why I'm excited, because sometimes you think there's not organizations like the Urban League out here. You know, when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm staring at my ceiling fan, dealing with all the problems of the world, I don't know if I'm the only person that does that or not, but you know, I think, who is taking care of this? Like, is this all me? Like, is this, you know, those type of things. So knowing that these organizations are out here and that there's competent folk making good ideas as to what needs to be done, my hat's off to the entire folks. Everyone here, please reclaim your vote quickly. Please tell them where they can find more information, which websites they can go to, and we'll put it on the screen.
So
Go ahead.
they can go to reclaimyourvote.org. You can go to MWUL.org, or you can go to MWUL.org and find more information at all those websites.
Sounds like you've heard it here. As we close tonight, let's take a hard look at where we stand with voting in Delaware. Right now, 786,577 Delawareans are registered, with nearly half identifying as Democrats, a quarter as Republicans, and the rest opting for no party at all. In the 2020 presidential election, Delaware exceeded national voter turnout, hitting 67.7%, but just 2 years later, less than half of registered voters showed up to the polls, ladies and gentlemen. And this year, in 2024, the primary turnout limped to 22%. These are numbers, sure, but they're more than that. They're a message. We're not just dealing with apathy. We're looking at disengagement, disconnection from a system that's supposed to represent us all. And before we move on, let's remember this. The right to vote was never a given, especially not for African Americans here in Delaware. This wasn't just a chapter in a history book. It was a brutal, relentless struggle. In Delaware, like so many places, Black Americans faced down poll taxes, literacy tests, and outright intimidation, systematic barriers designed to keep them silent, even with the 15th Amendment supposedly guaranteeing the right to vote. True access was denied for generations, and despite it all, they persisted and they won. The Reclaim Your Vote initiative isn't just about pushing more people to the polls. It's about ensuring that no one has to fight that same battle again. And it's about reminding us all that this right was hard won. So what are we doing with it? That's the question. Thank you for tuning in to the agenda tonight. And remember, the strength of our vote, the strength of our democracy, isn't some abstract concept. It's real, and it depends on our willingness to act. So don't let apathy decide your future. Stay engaged, stay informed, and let's protect what so many before us fought to secure. Good night, be safe, and thanks for tuning in.